Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. This episode 48, which is so crazy.
Crazy.
But today we have a special guest who I've been very excited to bring on with us. This is Vikki. She's a cancer survivor and also works at a cancer center here in Tampa. So we're very fortunate to have you here to talk about your experiences and, share what you know. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. My name is Vikki Pinkos. I live in Tampa, Florida, or in the suburbs of Tampa, Florida. I'm a registered nurse and I work at Moffitt Cancer Center in the capacity of as an inpatient manager. I manage an inpatient oncology med surg unit. And I was connected with you ladies through my daughter, Catherine Pinkos, who attends Florida State University. She's in grad school up there right now. I do not recall how Catherine met you, Gaby, but I'm glad she did. And I think basically she wanted to connect me with you because of my personal cancer journey. And I will soon be 20 years cancer free in January of 2026.
That's so great.
And I decided I was a patient at Moffitt. And after I had been away from that journey, if you will, for about 5 years, I decided I wanted to go back and help advance the mission and basically work for the place that saved my life. And so I've been there 14 years, going on 15 years now, trying to
Wow,
do
that's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Chills.
Yeah.
I
I
know,
love
I love that.
So great. Well, so I think what connected you with my story is that my doctoral research was in cancer survivorship. So I think when Catherine heard about that, she was like, hey, here's my mom. Yeah, so really awesome. You have a beautiful story, and I'm so glad to hear that you've really gone forward this long after your diagnosis and you've had such a great quality of life. So, with that in mind, what would you attribute to your ability to come out of cancer survivorship journey with such a good attitude and a health focus and a willingness to give back to the place that saved you? There's like so much that goes into that.
There is. Well, basically, I wanted to, I was young. I was 34 years old when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I was pregnant with Catherine at the time.
Wow.
So I had to start chemotherapy when I was 7 months pregnant with Catherine. So she and I have really been through a lot together.
Yeah, wow.
Time that before she was born. So I think the biggest drive for me was the will to live. Right, I was fairly newly married and had been married less than a year at the time of my diagnosis, and just wanting to thinking about my own mortality at the young age of 34, and live and raise my child, you know, and watch her grow up and do all those things that you're supposed to be able to do as a mom of a child. And
Yes.
and when I was first diagnosed, I was told, I had what the good cancer, in air quotes. And
Yeah.
to me, good is not the adjective I would ever use to describe cancer. However, having been in the business for a long time, I understand why those terms were used because there could have been worse cancer diagnoses, if you can imagine. So, it was a very long journey. I unfortunately, when I started treatment with Catherine, I had to have an emergency C-section after my fourth treatment. And then a week later, I was back in the doctor's office, getting right back up on the horse because we had
Yeah.
a race to finish.
Right.
And I did finish all in all. I had 6 months of chemotherapy and 5 weeks of radiation because I had a large mass on my chest. And I
Wow.
went back to work as quickly as I could because we wanted to buy a home and, get on with our lives. And this diagnosis really sidelined us.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, at my 6 month PET scan appointment, it came back positive. So I had some more disease recurrence. So I knew then that things would look a lot different than what we planned, and I had to go back into treatment. So a week after Catherine turned 1, I started chemotherapy again. And so that was really the long journey. That was the hard journey. Because as dorky as it sounds, I was alone then, right? It was just me. There was no Catherine inside of me anymore. And I believe that God grants mothers special graces. And I just felt like, I really kind of felt like and knew I was going to be okay when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
I did. I was like, well, that's it. I'm dead. I'm a goner, you
Right.
know.
Wow.
But I mean, that was the initial, and then you have to wrap your head around, okay, what do I need to do to take care of this?
Hmm.
And so regroup and refocus and just think about the journey ahead. It was hard. It was a very hard journey.
Yeah.
So I went back into treatment preparing for transplant. And in October of '05 is when I went to Moffitt for the first time and started my preparation. I had already begun as they call it, the salvage chemotherapy to kind of try to wipe out the bulk of the disease before you start the transplant process. And then I went into Moffitt in October and started all kinds of special testing and met with my oncologist there and, to kind of talk about the plan, what we were going to do. And then on December 27th, I went into Moffitt to start high dose chemo and transplant. And so, we left Catherine with my in-laws up in Ocala, and Joe took me down to Moffitt. Joe's my husband. We just celebrated 22 years on Saturday. So, and we went into Moffitt on December 27th, and then on January the 4th, I received my stem cells after receiving several days of high dose chemo. And then just again, I was in the hospital for 21 days, out of my mind half the time. I have about 5 collective memories from those days in there, and I couldn't wait to get home just to be home to see my baby. I think I saw her like maybe 3 times. I don't really remember a lot of it. So then then another part of the journey, we still had some more to go because I had 2 readmissions. I was very dehydrated, still very sick. So, gosh, when did I go back to work? July of that year, actually. I was like, I got to get back to work. We got to buy a house. We need money. And I'm not one that really, really sits still a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So went back to work in July, and I say, by the grace of God, Moffitt Cancer Center, here I am alive and cancer free almost 20 years. So, but I think just really and truly, like I said, again, it just the will to live and want to see my child. I can tell you something. At one point in my first round of treatment, I think I was on treatment number 8, and I actually did not start to feel really bad until after Catherine was born. Right, the first 4 treatments, it really didn't feel bad. Yeah. I got up to treatment 8, and then I was starting to really feel sick. And I remember sitting in the bathroom, sick as a dog, so sick. And I told Joe, I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm so frustrated. I'm over it. And he is a big sports guy. And he goes, okay, just think about this. Let's say this was a hockey game. You've already got through the first 2 periods. You got 1 period to go. Just 1 more period and you're done. It was pretty cute. Yeah. But I mean, he's like, no, you're not going to give up. You've got Catherine, you've got me, and all this kind of stuff. But boy, in that moment, I was ready to throw in the towel. And I could honestly see how when you are an older person, like let's say you're in your 70s or 80s, who wants to do that? It's no fun. It's exhausting. Yeah. So I could see why people don't want to do it.
I have a question. What do you think, for you personally, was the hardest thing to deal with mentally and emotionally?
Like the thought of death, for sure. Dying. Still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just definitely because I did not want to die, right? And so the anxiety that I developed as a result of going through this journey, I probably was always a little more high strung than some people, but it just made me it amplified whatever baseline anxiety I may have had. You know how some people are you've got some people that are on the calm side and some people that are maybe more wound up a little bit more naturally. That would have been me. And then just going through this journey just amplified any sort of anxiousness I may have had, and that definitely for me is something that still lingers. I tell people that when you go through a cancer diagnosis, you get the initial bomb dropped on you, boom, right? And then after you're done with treatment, you have what I liken to is the nuclear fallout, where it's just like, it just keeps falling and falling and falling on you. And I have symptoms I deal with today. Like I have tinnitus ringing in my ears that I've had since April of 2006, and it will never go away because of the damage caused by the chemotherapy because it's ototoxic, right? So there are things that you just deal with. I mean, I was thrown into menopause at a very early age of 35. Yeah. So think about, I'm not sure what your ages are, but as you approach your 40s and mid 40s into 50s, all those things that kind of gradually you go through, I dealt with immediately. Yeah. And then, there are things that if we could see inside of our bodies, I always say that if you had x-ray vision and you could just see inside someone who's been through something like this, you could really probably appreciate so much for what they've been through because it ages your organs.
Yeah.
Like my for me at the time I was young, right? And so we talked a lot about hormone therapy for to help me kind of combat some of the symptoms I was having. But at that time, over 20 years ago, the literature and studies did not said that no, you should not give women extra hormones because it could cause breast cancer or predispose you to breast cancer. Well, now 20 something years later, we know that's not true. Like look at and they know that estrogen's good for the heart, right? Well, I've gone so many years without that. I'm not even a candidate for that anymore because my arteries are probably a little harder. My vasculature is not as compliant as someone else that hasn't been through this. So you have to be very careful. It can get really gritty and detailed of all the things that you have to deal with. And I'm sorry if I'm talking way above
No,
anybody's
no,
head.
no, no, we appreciate it. You know what? Go ahead.
I was gonna just ask, like, I think it's interesting hearing you talk, and I know Gabby has a lot of research in like cancer and stuff, and me being in mental health and seeing so many clients, like my clients that have been diagnosed, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, even when you're like recovered, right, and you're like in remission, the anxiety of year to year, like the 6 month checkups, and like you live in this anxiety of, how do you stay present with, okay, I'm better, this is great, I'm hopeful, and I'm so appreciative, I want to live my life, without this like illuminating in the backgroundness of like, I still have a doctor's appointment coming up, and they, what if. So what do you have to say about that?
It's real and it's so hard. And so here I am 20 years out almost, right? And I have had other health issues that I've had to deal with, just natural aging. And I had to have a hysterectomy last year, and and there was something on my CAT scan, and we were afraid I might have ovarian cancer at one point. Like I was dying.
Yeah.
The anxiety was just intense and incredible. I think the big thing is what people don't realize when you don't have to worry about those things, you're just like, life is good. What's your biggest worry? Like, oh my God, I was so busy at work today, or oh my God, I forgot to do something, or my clothes aren't washed, or I've got to make the bed, or I have to mop, or whatever. When you have this, it's something that looms over you, right? And it just stays there. And if you could see the invisible backpacks that people carry this anxiety in every single day, for me, it just I would be anxious up until would go get my testing done, and then, wait, like hold your breath and just wait to get that phone call that it's all good, it's negative, and you're like, whew, now I feel like I could think about things. And for me, it's just the mental pressure and anxiety of just wanting so desperately for things to be good and waiting for that phone call. It's the waiting is the hardest part, Tom Petty says, and it's so true. Or he said, God rest his soul. It's very hard. You just and one thing I tell my team, I'm a manager and I have a large team of team members, and I see this kind of stuff every day with our patients, right? And it's really hits close to home for me. And I tell my team, I don't care what kind of a day you're having, and I don't expect people to leave their problems at the door because you just can't do that. You're not a robot, right? We're human. We carry those burdens everywhere we go and with every interaction we have. My expectation though is that they empathically connect with our patients. And, I can remember not getting to go home at night, right? Like I would overhear people talking about what they had for lunch, what they were doing on the weekends, what their plans were. I hated that. I would get so mad. I'd be like, shut up. I don't want to. And so when I started working at Moffitt, my first job, I worked in the recovery room in the PACU. So I recovered people after surgery.
Yeah.
And we were very closely packed in there with just curtains that separated each bay, right? And so the people would be like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing for lunch today? What did you bring today?" And I would pull my curtain to close them out so they would not talk to me in front of my patients, because I'm extremely sensitive to
Yeah.
being so nauseated that I wanted to eat but I couldn't eat, and to think about someone else enjoying food because I love to eat, right? That would make me angry.
Sure.
So I'm super sensitive to those things. And
Yeah.
I can remember when I would leave the hospital at night and I would drive past the front and look up at the windows back where in the area that I was a patient, and I would say, thank you, God, I get to go home tonight, because there was a time I didn't. So,
Wow. Yeah, I think that was a question that I wanted to ask you. With your experience, what do you feel you have a deeper understanding of with the people you work with compared to
mhm.
people who haven't been through diagnosis? Like it gives you perspective, right?
I tell my team members, and I actually, when I go in to round on patients, and I don't tell my story a lot, but what I will say to them is, if they're expressing some concerns to me, or maybe they had a bad night, or maybe there was some service recovery that I need to perform, my words to them are, I know what it is like to be on the other side of the bed rail, and it is horrible. And so I tell my team that until you have been on the other side of that bed rail, you have no idea what these people are going through. None whatsoever. You can take care of hundreds and hundreds of these patients, but until you're the one in the gown on the bed with an uncertain future, or hearing horrible news, or having to go to surgery or have a procedure, you don't know. It's really hard. It's very hard.
And another thing, in at least in my research perspective in cancer, like when I've dealt with patients in lobbies and just talking to them to get their story, right? I hear a lot of what you're saying, that question mark is always the most stressful part for them.
Horrible.
But in talking to many of them, the complaint that I heard was, we get a pamphlet about getting support, and that's where it ends. So do you feel that that is still a pervasive issue, or do you feel like there's more follow-up with, how can we help you? What kind of support do you need? Here's resources. Here's a therapist. Here's a provider, you know?
Moffitt does a really good job. We have a lot of support groups, a lot. So I would say a couple things. On the inpatient and outpatient side, our social workers are highly engaged with our
Yeah,
patients.
great.
So I have two social workers on my unit that I deal with every day. And when we sit and do our interdisciplinary rounds every morning at 10, and we talk about every patient on the floor, and the social workers are very keen on, if there needs to be a goals of care discussion, which would be an end of life discussion. The goals of care is what we're preempting talking about hospice, right? Because what's the goal now, right? We're running out of options. And that's a tough, tough decision. That's a tough conversation, because as much as I might feel it's appropriate for that patient, it's very personal. You have to make the choice, right? And so we also offer, you know, like I said, the support groups. A lot of the support group conversations are had in the ambulatory setting,
Hmm.
not necessarily the inpatient side, because they don't have the bandwidth to do those things when they're in the inpatient setting. But I will tell you, we have, for young people with cancer, we have a fantastic program, the adult and the adolescent and young adult program, the AYA program at Moffitt. That was partly established by one of our very prominent sarcoma physicians who has since retired, Dr. Doug Letson. He partnered with, if I recall correctly, Mr. Uh, Richard Gonzalez, with a big food group down here. Are you guys familiar with Tampa Bay area?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. I live in Tampa.
Okay, Gonsmart, the Gonsmart family,
Oh,
excuse me.
okay, yeah.
They own the Columbia restaurants. So Mr. Gonsmart is very philanthropic, and he donates a lot of money to Moffitt. I'm not trying to tell his business on here, but I mean, I've met him before. He's just a fantastic man. And him and Dr. Letson are friends as well. And so this AYA program, they took a room in the main campus of the hospital and they redesigned it. It's right outside of one of our nursing units, and it's a video game room, right, for these young adults, and to go in and play video games and do some other stuff in. And we also have a program for people on the ambulatory side. Like they want to actually take one of our rooms outside of one of our inpatient rooms at MMH, where I work now, and they want to do the same thing there and set it up, because sarcoma, there typically are younger people that have
Yeah,
sarcoma, so they
sure.
want to do that to support them.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think that Moffitt does a pretty good job with the support. When I was a patient, they really talked to me a lot about the support groups and stuff.
Yeah.
Fertility is a big subject with young people,
Yeah.
uh, fertility, and that's a very touchy subject.
Yeah.
And so I was not interested in doing any of that. I had a really strong support system between my family, my husband, my mom and dad, and my in-laws, and my church. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I did that,
Yeah.
but we do have those. And I think it can be challenging depending on where you are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the main issues also that I saw was some difficulty understanding that coping mechanisms might need to change,
Absolutely.
and that I don't know how familiar everyone is like with the research that I did, but I came from a perspective of survivorship and behavior change. So, if you're a cancer survivor and you're smoking to cope with the stress of having
Right.
cancer,
That's
that's
not good.
not good,
Right.
right? It's not helpful. If you're overeating, it's not necessarily good for your mobility and your heart and your ability to deal with treatment well. So, what would you say to someone who's going through that mental hurdle of, I have this diagnosis. Now they're telling me I can't cope in the ways that I've coped my whole life. I don't have support. Is it worth it to give up things that I love that make me feel safe and comfortable and secure, even though they're kind of killing me?
Number one, I would say yes, it's worth it because if you don't, you're likely going to die from your disease. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, it's
Right.
just, you got to do, it's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term goal, you
Right.
know? And
Yeah.
I I never smoked, drank or anything like that. So I didn't have advice like that to give up. But my husband used to smoke, and I watched the struggle that he went through to quit, how
Yeah.
hard it was, the many, many, many times. And I'll tell you, I've recovered patients in the recovery room that smoked the morning of their surgery.
Right.
So it is real. It is a real thing. Alcohol and tobacco do heavily contribute to the disease. And we know sometimes all the help that we try to give people that it's just
Yeah.
not going to make a difference. But I'll tell you something interesting. My grandfather died when he was 66 and he had cancer. And he smoked my entire life. He was never without a cigarette.
Yeah.
And back in those days, smoking back in the his 50s and 60s was kind of a cool thing to do, right? We didn't everybody smoked back then. Well, he died in 1990, and I remember one of the last conversations I had with him, asking him how he felt. And he said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing, if I had to do it all over again, I'd die doing something I love," because he loved to smoke, and he quit smoking about 6 months before he died.
Wow.
It did not save his life, and it was not going to save his life. So
Right.
I think it's really important. If I were sitting across the table from somebody and they had to talk to me about what they wanted to do and what they wanted to give up and not give up, if I had a feeling of where they really were in their disease and I knew it wasn't going to make a difference, I'd say keep doing what you love. Because what I saw, what he struggled with and what he went through,
Yeah.
again, his cancer was caught way too late. He was from a generation that didn't go to the doctor, a man, didn't talk about these things. So, but look at all the advancements we have made in the
Yeah.
field
Right.
since that time, since 1990. I mean, we are doing things for people now that we never would have done then. So
Yeah.
people have more of an opportunity now to beat this disease than they ever have before.
Right.
It's exciting.
Well, I'm curious to to kind of piggyback on that, and I know Gabby, this is kind of what we've talked about too. Like there is like a sadness and frustration for me when I think people get diagnosed and then like what Gabby said, like you're looking for you're basically flipping your life upside down. If you're a person who was unhealthy and then you like get this cancer diagnosis, it's like surprise, you need to change your relationship with food and your relationship with exercise and your relationship with all this stuff. Like that's let's get you this healthy lifestyle. So it's interesting to see some people be diagnosed and like change and stay into the healthy lifestyle because it's like this anxiety of like I want to change my life and be healthy so this doesn't happen again. And then you have some people that are diagnosed and scared to death, so they change for a certain amount of time, get in the
Mm-hmm.
clear, and then they're like,
Go back.
I'm in the clear. I'm going to go back to doing all the stuff that I did before. So I'm curious what you think about why people are scared to death and change, and why some people are scared to death, change, and then kind of slide back into old behaviors.
I'll just use myself as an example. So, not speaking of cancer in particular, but some of the side effects from the medications that you take and the treatments you take
Hmm.
have negative effects on other areas of your life. So,
Yeah.
my doctor and I talk a lot about my cholesterol. Okay. Now, there's a genetic component to that I'm never going to be able to change. But she said to me recently, she goes, "Don't feel too bad because all these things that you went through likely impacted where you're at now. I probably need to have less sugar in my diet because my hemoglobin A1C is borderline." But do you know how hard that is for me? Because I have a slogan that I live by. It's YOLO, you only live once.
Yeah.
And so when you have faced your own mortality, you kind of are like, you're not going to tell me what I can do or not. And that this is you talking to yourself, me talking to myself. Nobody, I'm not talking to anybody else but me.
All
You
right.
know, that little voice in your head. But I think it's just, I think it depends on a lot of things. Their age, where
Sure.
they're at in their lives. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I have a person on my unit that I see that's in their 80s, we recently performed a procedure on a lady. She was in her mid to late 80s and she had to have brain surgery. And I thought to myself, why are we doing this? Because I knew that the outcome, she was going to, depending on where you're operating on the brain, what you're taking out,
Yeah.
of that organ, that's going to impact how your quality of life.
Sure.
And I thought to myself, wow, this is not going to go well for her. What would I do if this were my mother and my mother-in-law? And so I think it just depends on where they're at and on the continuum in their personal lives. We do see plenty of people that don't, and it's too late.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
and that's sad. I mean, it is sad. I think screening prevention is really the biggest thing we can do is go to the doctor and get, and if something doesn't feel right or seem right, get checked out, because you see this kind of stuff happen a lot, and women need to get mammograms,
Yeah.
for sure. Like I need to get one this year myself.
Yeah.
And
Right.
screening mammograms now are covered by insurance. You don't even have to have a prescription. If your insurance covers it, which most of them do, you can just go in and get a screening mammogram. And then if they see something, they'll get in touch with someone to do something further. But I know I probably gave you more than what you wanted to hear there.
No,
But
no, that's fine.
it's hard. It's kind of hard because when you know so much about something, you have a tendency to just talk about
Yeah, of course. No, and we appreciate that. I think what my biggest question as someone on the therapeutic side and also who's been on the clinical side, what's your thoughts on how to talk to people about quality of life versus quantity of life?
it. Well, that's a good point because most patients, I think, would tell you they want quality. Okay, so when you're looking at somebody and I think age is a big factor. So I have a personal friend she's a friend of my husband's, and she's in her, I think she might have just turned 40. I can't remember. We just went to her birthday. I forgot her age. Anyway, the point being, she's young,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so she has she's already survived cancer once, and now she's got this fairly aggressive type of pancreatic cancer. So you guys have probably heard, that pancreatic cancer has a survival rate of 5 years out is like 30% or something. It's obnoxiously low. It's not
Yeah.
as good as it should be,
Right.
depending on where it's at and when it's found. So
Yeah.
she's going through some aggressive treatment up at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Mhm.
But she's young, right? And
Right.
it just depends on, she wants probably both.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you can kind of get both.
Right.
But as your body ages, it's really about quality.
Yeah.
And I have dealt with patients and families that said, you know what, we're just going to go home and we're just going to live.
Right.
Knowing they accepted the fact that there would come a time where life would be very difficult.
Sure.
It's not typically like you went out and had a great day today, you're going to go to bed and not wake up.
Right.
There's things that happen usually, in between there, but I've seen it go both ways. And that's hard. That's just hard. So difficult to watch. But I think most people would want quality over quantity, depending again where they're at in their age.
Right.
Right. So it seems like the consistency I'm hearing from you is age is such a factor for your mental state of deciding a lot of these things.
I think it is. I've seen it in my experience. Because again, your body can only withstand so much. You know, Hodgkin's disease is a disease of young people, right? And so the textbook definition of that is like 34 is the cutoff age, right?
Yeah.
Well, by golly, I was 34. I slid right in underneath that age deadline. It's easy to think about, oh, I'm young, because think about your heart's still good, your
Mhm.
kidneys still work,
Right.
everything, your liver still functions. But as a person ages, depending on if they have any other comorbidities, like if they are a smoker, if they are a heavy drinker, if they've got kidney disease or, don't take good care of themselves or they're diabetics, it impacts every single organ system and it really does make a difference. It really does. I don't think people appreciate that and know that, but it just, your vision, God, your vision can be impacted. I mean,
Yeah.
just so many different things.
Wow. Well, I think in listening to you, and obviously we're all women here, I think that we, just like generations before, kind of have a tendency to poo-poo everything like we're good, we don't need to go to the doctor. So, hearing your experience as a new mom with a cancer diagnosis, having your baby emergency, being separated from her, what would be something that you could advise women in their 30s, late 20s, 30s to advocate for themselves and make sure that we're getting checked and we're getting screened appropriately?
Yeah, I would say you have to own your health, right? You have to go to the doctor. You have to see a gynecologist regularly because they'll take care of your anything GYN related, including your mammograms and things like that. And you should see a regular doctor
Hmm.
at least once a year for labs. And if you find a lump or a bump that doesn't feel right anywhere in your body, you should get it checked out.
Yeah,
So, because there are all kinds of cancers that, again, when you start to work in this field, that you learn about.
yeah,
Sarcoma, very, very scary. It impacts people of all ages, the entire age range. And I have a friend whose 18-year-old just got diagnosed with sarcoma not long ago. She's had surgery, and you know, it's matter of fact, Catherine's very good friends with her, and I'm going to go see her mom and dad in a little over a week to go, spend a few days up there with them in Connecticut. It's very frightening.
sure.
And on my unit, we used to have the sarcoma population and they moved them to another unit. And I was actually very thankful because we had some young people that just, scares you and breaks your heart. But I would say you got to, if you find something, you feel something that doesn't feel right, a lump, a bump, you got to get it checked out, no
Yeah,
matter where part of your body it's in. I mean, colorectal cancer rates have, been on the rise.
yeah.
Breast cancer, obviously, and it's just really important that you get things checked out. You don't want to let something go.
Yeah, I want to make sure I ask this question before we end though. What would you say if there was anybody listening to this that was struggling with getting diagnosed with cancer, or somebody who's in survivorship and they're having a lot of emotions and having a lot of thoughts? What is the biggest, like, we like to give little tools on here of like, what is a tool you would give to somebody when they're in the pits or really struggling with this kind of thing?
So there's a couple things I would say. Something I did not do. What I would say, find somebody to talk to, a professional, right? Because you literally sometimes think you're going to lose your mind, you know. But I would also say, and I have a very strong faith. So I prayed a lot and I was surrounded by, good, strong prayer warriors. So that helped me. If you don't have that, you definitely got to get some professional help. And one thing I tell people a lot is just it's one step at a time. So when I was in the thick of the hardest part of my journey, all I thought about was the fact that I was sick. That's all I thought about. Like, we could be talking and saying, oh, this is the most delicious ice cream. And my very next thought would be, I have cancer. And then we could move on to how beautiful the sky was. And my very next thought would be, but I have cancer. And so if I could just have somebody distract me for 5 minutes at a time, it would help me not remember how bad I felt because I was really sick.
Yeah.
Like, the medication just made me so sick. And I just couldn't shake the feeling. And it just took time and a lot of time for it to go by. So I would say, remember, it's one foot in front of the other. Literally, you're overwhelmed. Okay, what are we doing right now? You're breathing. Okay, you got that down. You're up, you're vertical, you're walking. Okay, what do you need to do next? Is it take your vitamins? Is it eat? Is it get dressed? Is it, do you have to go to work? I know it sounds so silly, but just one little step at a time. Because, and then when you're listening to your options of your treatment and what you're going through, I would say join a support group or find somebody that you can talk to that can empathize with you. Because what I would do when I would be sitting in the waiting room at the bone marrow treatment center, even preparing for transplant and even after transplant, I had to go back in a lot. And I would sit in the waiting room and I would look at the people and I would look for young people. And if I found someone that looked young, I would look at their hair and I would see, do they have hair? And if they do have hair, how long is their hair? And I would try to guess how far out they were. If they were bald, I would try to guess, like, okay, maybe they just had their treatment. And I did this to myself mentally to try to say, okay, look, that person did it. Look, they've got hair now. I'll get there too. Like, just
Yeah.
being able to see other young people go through the same journey I was going through made me feel so much better, because honestly, I thought I would die.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, and then there's this part of you that's like, why would you think that? They got through it. But you just don't, everybody's journey is different. You don't know, you just don't know. So I think having other people that you can talk to that can relate to you to say, yeah, I had the same thing happen to me. And this is what I did. And this is how I got through it. And yes, it's going to hurt. You're going to get mouth sores, but they'll give you this magic mouthwash and you'll rinse your mouth out with it. And eventually the sores will go away. And your food's
Yeah.
going to taste terrible at first, but eventually it will taste better again. And, you can read all the literature and all the stuff that you want, but I think finding a real life person that's been through it is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, so my goal would be eventually to be able to, I want to become like a motivational speaker. And so my goal would to be able to kind of take my story on the road and tell people about what I've been through, to say, you can get through this. It doesn't sound very glamorous, I know, but it does make a difference, I think, for people to be able to connect with someone.
yeah, I think so. And I think just even what you're doing, returning back to a place that was so powerful and impactful for you,
Yeah.
is that first step in that journey and that goal that you have of really being able to share that with other people
Make it,
and be that person for someone,
yeah. Yeah.
you know?
I try hard.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
I love
Yeah.
that. I think it's one of those things where it's like anything that happens to individuals, you feel so alone in it until you find somebody who's gone through it. And then once you find, that's why we say support groups are important, right? Because it's like, and you would be that for people to be like, I actually get you and I know all the feelings and all the steps you're going through. Like that comforts people knowing, like, I'm not actually in this alone. Somebody gets it fully because of their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you real quick. I had a patient the other day that I sat and talked with for about 40 minutes. She was an older lady and she is nearing the end of her journey, right? And she was very upset. Her and her husband were very upset because she waited all day to find out she wasn't going to go get a procedure done. And she was NPO without food for hours and hours. So it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. She was crying. Now she's probably my mom's age, maybe a little older. And as I sat in her room, I just, I apologized. I got the doctor on the phone to try to work through this, to figure out what happened. And it was literally a scheduling ordeal. They had an emergency. Somebody had to go before her. Hers was not an emergency. Was it necessary? It was, but it wasn't an emergency. So she got pushed back to the next day, but she wanted to go home, right? So her and her husband wanted to drive 2 hours back home, but they couldn't because they had to wait for this test. And as she's crying, I could see where most people would be like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Okay, so you didn't eat food all day long. It's not a big deal. You're going to get to eat now. You just ordered your food. You'll be fine. You're going to get your test tomorrow. You're going to go home.
Yeah.
That would be what most people would say and think, right? But to her, this was very catastrophic. And it would take someone to have been there to fully appreciate and understand what that's like. I mean, even the provider couldn't really understand it, right?
Yeah. Right.
But I got it. Like, and that's why I stayed with her. And that's why I stayed with her while she cried. And I was absolutely exasperated when I left her room. I was like, oh my God, I got to go home now. Like, I was like worn out. So taking on that burden of other people really does have an impact on me. And I know that I probably need some professional help myself.
No.
But I mean, I feel that way sometimes. But I wanted to tell you that story to just illustrate that, again, until you've been there, it's really hard to appreciate, because I think we internally have these defense mechanisms to try to protect our own selves, where we deflect information or we go, okay, it's no big deal. When maybe to this other person, it is a huge
Everything.
deal.
Yeah.
And you have to connect with that. And it's hard to do when you've never been there.
Yeah.
It's really
100%.
like, I never wanted to work on oncology. Never. It was
Really?
my desire. Nope.
Wow, that's so amazing. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I was a critical care nurse before I started working in oncology. That's what I like. I liked critical care stuff. I didn't want to work with cancer patients.
Yeah. Wow. But, I think it turns into a calling when we have experience with certain things and, I think
Have to lean.
you yeah, it's crazy. But I think, we all kind of understand the burden of empathy and how that can really translate into something really profound for someone and how to work through it with them when they don't think you know what they really mean and what they've gone through. Like that is a very hard thing to process with someone. Like I kind of can imagine what you've been through, but I haven't really been there. And that can create a rift sometimes. So I think it's a really beautiful thing that you have that you can.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, I have patients where I have had to say to them, I understand. I've been on the other side of the bed rail.
Hmm.
I'm going to help try to get this right for you. Where it could be, I didn't tell that patient that day, but I didn't think she needed to know. What she needed was someone to sit with her and just let her cry so she could get through the fact that, okay, I'm not getting my test today and now I can order food and eat and I'll get
Yeah.
it done tomorrow and I'll go home tomorrow. Those were the facts, but she couldn't get past the emotion, right?
Sure.
To some, it would be very black and white. Okay, let's order your food. Let's get your dinner. Stop crying. Let's give you your meds. Let's
Yeah.
relax. Let's have a good night. You're gonna get it tomorrow. But it wasn't that way for her
Sure.
initially. She got there. It just took her longer. And you have to learn to be that way when when you've been through it. You get it. You're like, just it's okay. It sucks.
For sure. Well, we appreciate you sharing everything and, giving us some insight and tips for people that we can share and hopefully it impacts more people than you already have impacted. It's really
Hope
wonderful.
so. What an honor to
Yes.
be on your show. Thank you for
Yeah,
asking.
we appreciate you. Like you have such a great story. I appreciate your vulnerability, even sharing it with me. Like I feel honored that you even shared it. It's touching, and thanks for going out and sharing it with other people so that they can also feel that support. So yeah,
I'm just proud of myself that I didn't cry. I was like, oh God, I'm gonna cry.
Oh,
But
we love a
a
crier
lot of
on here, Vicky. Definitely would have taken you crying on our podcast.
oh, well, I don't know. I think Catherine shared my link to my Community of Courage campaign. Moffitt had a Community of Courage campaign a few years back, and they asked me to do the video. And I used to be able to watch it, and I can't even watch it anymore. I'm like, God, it's so emotional. Oh, so horrible.
We love emotions over this way, so all
yeah.
emotions are welcome.
Yeah, but listen, anytime I can help in any way, it's just been an honor, honestly. And I want
Thank you.
people to know that, there's support out there. And if I can help anybody in any way, I'm happy to do it because it's a hard journey, really is. So thank you
Yeah.
for your time,
Well,
ladies.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you. And thank you to everybody who's listening. We hope you enjoyed Vicky like we did. And just like another episode of We All Have Stuff, Vicky understands that sometimes we all have cancer stuff to sort out.
We always invite our listeners, if they have any questions for us or a guest, to post them. So we'll be sure to pass them along if there's ever,
Please.
questions that come in. Well, we appreciate that. So feel free to send in questions, everyone.
Yes.
All right, ladies, thank you. Are we
All
done?
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
We're
right.
all good.
Thanks, Vicky. Nice meeting you. Bye.